Just like that.
Here we go, folks. Welcome to the American Warrior Show, the podcast, the American Warrior Society. My name is Mike Seeklander, and we are live. Typically, I'm doing the sponsor read, and I record it so I can record it and try it a few times and then get pissed off and curse and whatever else. But guess what? I'm live, folks. Here we are. American Warrior Show podcast episode. I think maybe we are at 401 or 402 or something like that. And we got a show today for you. It's going to be down and dirty. It's going to be quick and functional for you, hopefully. We're going to talk about my experiences over the last 6 or 7 months, really pushing some rifle skills or trying to push my rifle skills to the next level because of the PCSL Nationals I shot last year, as well as the PCS Nationals coming up. And then I was awarded a slot, an individual slot to the World Shoot, the PCC World Shoot, which ownership, full disclosure, I made it out there after a horrible trip that was 3 days late, shot jet lag, and I disqualified. Lovely times, but listen, it's part of the game. So we'll talk about that in the show. I know Rich will dig into that as far as all that good stuff. But before we get into the show, I want to talk about today's show feature sponsor, and that is the Cool Fire Sidekick. For those of you that are listening to the show right now, I am holding up a beautiful Wilson Combat AR-15 style rifle. And if you looked at the rifle, you're going to see a blue training magazine, which is not part of the Sidekick package, but I use it as a weighted training magazine and in a very interesting side canister just outside of the ejection port. Now, what I've done to convert to the Sidekick is I have removed the bolt from my rifle and I've added the Cool Fire Sidekick bolt, and then I've added this canister. The canister holds compressed CO2. Which allows me to, once I've charged the charging handle, pull the trigger and voila, I get live recoil, not live fire, but live recoil. And when I'm shooting the gun, I'm on the shoulder and managing recoil like I'm supposed to be managing the recoil. This literally mimics about as close to any training tool I've ever seen live recoil. So you can train from the comfort of your home. Now, the Cool Fire Sidekick bolt also has a laser module in it. So if you order with the laser module, you're going to get a laser indicator. And the way the bolt is designed, there's a small indicator that goes in the chamber very precisely. So the laser module is actually very accurate. So if you zero this laser module or your optic to the laser module in your training gun, you could probably be shooting and training at 20, 30, 40, even 50 yards, assuming it wasn't too bright outside to use the laser module. So Cool Fire Sidekick, in my opinion, Cool Fire makes some of the best dry fire training tools out there. This is the best rifle, PCC, or whatever you want to call it, training tool I have ever seen. So this is no longer dry fire. It's Cool Fire, right? So if you want to work on your trigger speed or your multiple shots drills, you can do that with the Cool Fire Sidekick. They are our feature sponsor. So before we get into today's show, I want to remind you that we do have a website. I know Rich Brown is going to talk about some of the other sponsors, AmericanWarriorShow.com. By the end of today, likely today is May 30th, I believe, we should have an updated Cool Fire Trainer discount code. So if you order it, use the discount code. They just had a big Memorial Day sale. Unfortunately, that Memorial Day sale ended and that discount code is no longer active. So make sure to check out AmericanWarriorShow.com for our featured sponsor, the Cool Fire Sidekick, as well as their other products. And one of my favorite holster companies, on the planet is Precision Holsters. Precision Holsters is owned and operated by Mr. John Marquez. He's the CEO. He also has a partner in the business. And I met John many years ago. And he brought me some holsters to a class in Sacramento, California, what he called his fast holster, PHAST holster, as well as his Ultra Appendix holster, which is now a newer version, a newer model. It's a different name. I don't want to spill the beans on the name because I'm not certain if he's promoted this yet. But the bottom line is he's got some of the best training products in terms of holsters and carry pouches and belts that I've ever seen. Like when he brought these to class, I said, well, let me literally put it on in class and try drawing from the holster. And I did. And I kept the holster on. I didn't switch back out to the old holster that I was carrying. I won't mention what brand it was. I literally left the holster on and trained. It was a defensive handgun class for the rest of the class with the holster. And then I put his competition handgun holster on for the remainder of my competition handling class. So fantastic company, Precision Holsters. The discount code is on the website. Once again, AmericanWarriorshow.com. Mr. Rich Brown, if you're joining me, why don't you talk about some of the sponsors real quick, and then we'll get into the show.
I'd love to, man. If you're like me, you got dogs in your life, man. I full disclosure, I love dogs much more than I do people. But we also want our dog to listen and obey, and that's where Tip Top Canine comes in. And you can go to AmericanWarriorshow.com. We've got a link over there so that you can apply to become a dog trainer using the Tip Top Canine method. There's a lot of financial incentives to this. And it's something that I've been thinking about, Mr. Seeklander, because dogs are such a big part of mine and my wife's life that, I'm thinking maybe this is something that I should get into, because the constant barking, jumping, and ignoring our commands, all this kind of stuff can be extremely frustrating and exhausting. But the Tip Top Canine method is proven. They use positive reinforcement, not negative reinforcement. So there's, you don't dish your dog with verbal and mockery and humiliation. This is all positive reinforcement. Good stuff. Great people. Been a long time sponsor of our show. Franchise opportunities are available for you. Go to AmericanWarriorshow.com. I also want to talk about, and you mentioned Precision Holsters, and this is something that you and I really kind of wrestled with, is like, would it be okay to kind of have a second holster sponsor? And we come to the conclusion, yes. And our sponsors agreed that it was no problem for them, because they don't get in each other's lane. Precision Holsters offer some amazing competition holsters and some appendix holsters, but really none of them are weapon mounted light bearing like this G45 I've got with a TLR7 Alpha on it. It's an absolutely phenomenal product. Shan from Works over there, he is all into the low light. Check him out. He's got the new Bisect, and I've got one in my hot little hands right here. It's absolutely phenomenal. Now, this is not a light bearing holster, but it can be attached. You can put you can run it in front with a pistol mag and some other stuff. Right now, I've just got it set up really slick and simple. But check them out, works.com, WERKZ.com. So we've talked about Tip Top Canine, Mike, Works, Precision, Cool Fire. We got 7 folks joining us live. Please like and hit that share button. If you came here today thinking you're going to get to talk to Fox contributor Joey Jones, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but Fox News sent me Behind the Badge book to read in preparation for the show. He had some scheduling commitments that got in the way, but he will be back on the show, I think, here in 2 weeks. So more to follow on that. His book, Behind the Badge, Answering the Call to Service on America's Home Front. Of course, Joey Jones was a former EOD Marine, lost both of his legs in combat. And actually, Mike, this is an interesting point. I watched him on a show 2 days ago on, I think it was Fox and Friends, and he was talking about Memorial Day, and he said there was a Marine killed with him when he lost both of his legs, and that Marine was from Delta Company, 4th CEB.
Wow.
Knoxville native, yeah. And Delta Company is having our reunion not tomorrow, Saturday, but a week from Saturday. And unfortunately, you'll be out of the country and unable to attend. But so yeah, it's going to be interesting to talk to him about because Delta was attached to him, our old Delta unit.
Well, man, it's sad you can't have him on the show today, but guess who saved the day, folks? Guess who is here for you on the American Warrior Show? This guy right here, this big, good-looking, unshaven, bald-headed guy getting ready to go to the range. I'm shortcutting my session this morning. I'm giving up my training time for you. Like I literally, Rich, I don't think I've ever given my training time up for anyone else except for the audience on this show. And matter of fact,
it's true, actually.
You decided to pick my brain about something that I've been pretty passionate about for a while. And so, Mr. Rich, should we jump into that?
Yeah, man. Thanks everybody for being on. TC's on. Walt, Gerald, Donald, please like and hit that share button, man. We got a great show for you. We're going to talk about rifles, specifically PCC and carbine. And I think we should start with PCC because you alluded to it at the beginning. You shot the PCC Worlds over in Czechoslovakia last week or the week before last?
God, what week is it, dude? Yes, it was a week and a half ago. Technically, I shot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stages in the world shoot at the Czech Republic. I didn't shoot the 8th stage because, well, that's not true either. I shot half of the 8th stage because it got DQ'd midway on the stage. So full ownership, folks. If you are a competitive shooter or someone that trains serious, Unfortunately, you're probably going to have a day where you DQ. I remember many, many years ago, and I had DQ'd in a pretty big match. It was a major match. It wasn't my first DQ. My first DQ was actually at Guncraft or Gun Crafters, I believe, in Knoxville, Tennessee, where I did a turning draw and the gun fell out of the holster because I didn't have a good locking mechanism. Hence, I moved forward and never, ever shot with a holster like that again. It evolved and helped me change my gear. The next DQ was actually at an area championship. It was my area championship near Charleston, South Carolina, and shooting the Area 6 match. And I came into a port, shot a bunch of shots, came out of the port, finger was in a kind of a weird position, and I bumped my finger on the wall and it hit the trigger and the gun went off. And I tried to keep running the stage, but they stopped me. So that was my area championship. I was crushing it. I was shooting great, and there I am getting DQ'd. I stayed with the squad the rest of the day, and I remember the advice I got from some buddy of mine. I don't even remember who it was. It might have been Big Eric Lund. I don't remember, but it specifically was, man, you know what? Everybody DQs. And it was not that year, but probably the next year that I actually watched my good friend and legend, probably the GOAT, Rob Latham, DQ at the Nationals. So it wasn't the World Shoot, but it was the Nationals. So anyways, did a reload on the World Shoot, full ownership. It was 100% my responsibility to tweak and modify gear so it suits my needs, as well as to do more repetitions in dry fire. And about a week before the World Shoot, if you want to know, they were adding a rule. They added a rule where the muzzle had to be below the berm. So I had the PCC in a position where it was up nice and high, and it got a little bit out of control. And as I was hitting the mag release, my finger slipped inside the trigger guard. Muzzle was generally toward the target, probably a little bit high. I maintained the in the berm rule, but once again, full disclosure, my fault, 100% my responsibility. I could point my finger at a lot of different things and say, well, it was the rule's fault. But ultimately, folks, when you make a mistake, you got to own it. In previous DQs, I modified gear and whatever else. In this case, I'm going to modify gear as well as do some different training repetitions. When I got back, I kind of reflected and said, well, what a waste of time this was. An entire waste of money and time. And I had another good buddy, a special operator in a specialized unit. And he said, you idiot, you just spent 6 months improving your long gun skills. How is that a waste of time? And I'm like, oh, yeah, duh, epiphany, great point. So here we are talking about what I learned. Folks, literally probably shooting close to 15,000 rounds plus over 6 or 7 months. And a lot of that will translate to more than likely a PCC Nationals that I will shoot this year, because I'm not going to run with my tail between my legs, and the PCSL Nationals. So I'll shoot probably the USPSA PCC and the PCSL Nationals. So there it is. Full disclosure, own it, move on, train, and no whiners in this world. It is what it is, right?
Okay. First of all, I want to go into why, because you flirted with PCC before. You flirted with 3-gun. You did some other things, why go into PCC? And the reason I asked that, it seems like the speed at which they're running is just incredible. I mean, it's so damn fast. And as we get older, I got to be honest with you, man, we've been best friends for 35 years. And I'm like, why the hell is Mike getting into PCC? Yeah. Maybe tell us that.
So, I would ask those of you watching right now, or those that maybe see the show later on, we don't get a ton of live traffic on this show, but if you listen to the podcast, share it with someone that needs to hear some of this stuff. And number one, I just own the DQ. Number two, it's a great question, Rich. Why am I doing this? I'm 53 years old. I know a lot of our listeners and audience that are listening to the show right now, or maybe watching the show, are maybe older, a little bit more senior. And for me, I like a challenge. I'm not certain I like this much of a challenge, but the reality is I like a challenge. And when offered the ability to go shoot that match, I put my hat in the bag, and I was selected as the alternate for the senior division team. Was it Mike Seeklander biting off more than he can shoot? Yes, it probably was to an extent. But the reality is, folks, we need something to train for. And every one of us, every single one of us watching me right now or listening is going to die. 100%. hopefully later than sooner, but you're going to die. So do you want to die having attempted some bigger, loftier things and maybe failed, maybe not done exactly as good as you want to? Or do you want to die someday going, I gave it a shot, I went after it? Because full disclosure, and maybe this will add to the show, and maybe some people will be like, "Yeah, this is irrelevant." Well, then move on to a different podcast. That's fine. When I was scheduled to leave, my flight was delayed, right? And I couldn't catch a flight the next day, so I was basically dropped from the match. I was out of the match, and then I kept scrambling, and finally found a flight that would allow me to travel internationally without the 72-hour window. There's a big yet to do in terms of traveling international with firearms. So I decided to go. I decided to go for it. Right. I'm going to lead from the front. I'm going to try to represent and teach my daughters and sons, what is the right thing to do, to not quit if you have the opportunity to go for it. Yes, the current PCC crowd out there they're doing some things that are unbelievable. I shot the PCC Nationals when it first came out many years ago. Placed in the top 5. Shot again. Placed probably in the top 10. Found my placement falling down, and then said, well, really not for me. I tend to take the opposite approach now. If I can train for a division and it adds to my skill level and I can learn something from it, and I'll give you a phrase. I remember I think it's a show called The Edge, Rich. In one scene, maybe it's not The Edge, it's something like that, but these two guys are in the plane crash.
It's The Edge, yeah.
And they got this bear hunting them, and one of the phrases was, what one man can do, another can do. And then in my mind, I'm like, these guys they're not superhuman. I will not probably ever be as fast on the trigger as good as Max Zogrand is. To think that I would be unrealistic. That's like thinking that probably tomorrow I'm going to start training for it and be able to do a flat-footed dunk with a basketball. We have to be realistic. But at the same time, what one man can do, another man can do, generally speaking. So can Mike Seeklander improve his trigger speed? Yes, I did dramatically, and I'm going to share some of those secrets with you today. Did I figure out how to set up and run a blowback style gun? Yes, because that's what I shoot. I shoot a Wilson Combat blowback style gun, where everybody today is shooting a roller delayed or a gas type system, which tends to recoil significantly softer. But for you listeners that have a blowback gun, you're probably not going to go sell that and buy a brand new gun tomorrow. A lot of people can't afford that. So how do we make our blowback gun work? So the reality is, Rich, two things. I need something to train for. I enjoy that. I don't mind failing if I'm learning, although I would prefer not to fail at the level that I failed here. Maybe if you call it a failure. But at the same time, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid to jump into the arena and run. One of our good buddies, Rich Brown, would say, "Get your shoes on, man. Get your shoes on. What are you afraid of? Get your shoes on. That someone's going to outrun you or outlift you or maybe whatever. Okay, well, whatever. Go for it. Give it a shot, man. Because when you're laying there, looking up or getting ready to go to the next place, wherever that is, you're probably going to be happy that you went after it, man." And that's what drives me. So, and that's also what drives my ability to teach my students. If I didn't fail at a lot of things, I would not be able to relay the things I have in books and articles and videos.
That's a good answer, man. And, Brad DeLauder, he's known for that. Put your shoes on. And I love that comment. I say it to my kids all the time, or any adult. Like, yeah, back in 1997, I was the cat's meow. I'm like, put your shoes on. And what that metaphor means to me, I don't know what it means to you, but it means, shut your mouth, put your shit on. Let's see what you got. I don't care how cool you were back in the day. What can you do right now, where you're at? And that's what it's all about. Let me ask you this, Mike. How were you doing in the 7 stages you were able to complete? Were you?
That's a great question. So not bad. So I'm going to be honest. I was competing in the senior division. And I tend to sometimes have loftier hopes than I maybe should. Right. The guy that actually won the senior division was a guy from Finland, I believe, and the dude placed 6th overall at the World Shoot, which is crazy. Like the next senior, it wasn't a U.S. shooter. I think like a really good shooter, Keith Garcia. It's been on this show or my show before. He was one of the leads in the senior team. I think he was. I'm guessing, Rich. I think it was 14th, 20th, or something overall. So one of these seniors made the top 10. I think it was 6th overall. Wow. Unbelievable. But compared to some of the other seniors, I did okay. And IPSC is a different deal. We had the berm rule. It's a 3-minute walkthrough. So the first stage that I shot in the match, completely jet lagged, was in a series of berms where when you're standing outside of the actual match itself, you can see 2 of the targets. You can't see the other 23 targets. It's a 42 or 43 round course. So you walk in, you get a stage briefing, and you got 3 minutes to find all the targets and all the positions and shoot. And I distinctly remember stepping up at a position. I was the second shooter, getting the load make ready command going, I don't even know where all the targets are. I can't believe this is my first stage of the world shoot. And shooter ready, standby. And in my mind, I said, here we go, and step into position. And I just started prepping the trigger and started seeing the holes appear in the targets. And I'm like, okay. And I survived it. So in those 7 stages, I had a couple that I did decent at, that I was holding my own compared to other division shooters, and a couple that certainly I wasn't that great. But I didn't have any misses. Wasn't dropping a lot of points. It was a good pace for me to continue to push, and then see. I had 4 more days to shoot. So it's a marathon, and I might have been done okay. I might have done okay. Let me say that clearly in the podcast.
What was your mantra when you stepped into that box? What your positive affirmations? What were you?
Well, thinking? I always do. And so for PCC, my mantra lately has just been, pull, drop, pull, press. I don't say that whole thing. Typically I'll say pull, because I know, and we'll talk about this here in a second, the lead hand is really the key in terms of structurally controlling the PCC, and shoot the dot, right? Put the dot where it needs to be, and shoot the dot. The dot dictates the pace. I don't need to think about anything. When we talk about shooting, here's a little mental tip where you write it down. In the inner game of tennis, which is a great book that I skipped for many, many years, this guy describes it as person 1 and person 2. Person 1 is your conscious mind. Person 2 is your unconscious. Person 2 already knows how to shoot the gun. I mean, I've shot 20,000 rounds through a PCC and rifle in the last 8 months of my life, maybe more, right? Counting the PCSL Nationals last year. So I don't need to think about that. I just need to tell person 1, the conscious brain, to shut up and let it go. His responsibility is the planning the route. Person 2 gets to shoot the gun. So if I just remind, person 1 just reminds person 2, hey, just grip and watch the dot. All that does is tie up person 1's busy, want to control everything mentality, and then just shoot the dot. The dot's going to tell you what's going on. It's also going to tell you, hey, I'm applying the pressure I need to the handgun or the PCC, or I'm not applying the pressure I need to. Tighten down a little bit or whatever else. So pull, shoot the dot.
That's great advice. And the dot dictates the pace, just like the sides of the speedometer kind of mentality.
100%. And in this first stage, I didn't know we'd get into this. But this is kind of interesting. It was I won't stand, or I won't move because I'm on the microphone here, but it was kind of a pivot to the right. And the first 4 targets were no shoot, open target, open target, open target at 43 and right around 46 and 48 yards, right? So we're not talking about 15-yard hosing targets like you shoot in USPSA in the US. It was, and I remember prepping the first one, making the dot settle down, shooting the dot on the no shoot, and boom, boom, I saw 2 holes appear. I'm like, okay, there we go. And then boom, on to the next position. Uniquely enough, when I loaded on that stage, the gun was kind of gyrating because I was moving and rotating. And my finger, I remember thinking, man, my finger was kind of, slipping and not in a great position on the gun because of how I'm kind of forcing the muzzle down inside the berm. Because if you have, the gun on that match, what they told us was if during the load or the unload, you're trying to maintain control, they'll give you a warning. But if you've got a hot gun in the stage and it goes over the berm, they'll DQ you. That's what we heard. Later on, I think they gave a lot of warnings. I don't think they actually DQ'd many people for that, but that's what I thought. So I'm in a different load position. A lot of times, as those that have done the defensive handgun or PCC programs, I give you an option to do a low tuck. So just a little bit of a tuck under the arm with the buttstock of the rifle, because that controls the movement of it and it gives you just more control. You don't really want the thing gyrating and moving as you're running. So anytime someone's doing a moving reload with a rifle or whatever else, you either got to pull it really tight into your shoulder, which for me causes a muzzle high position, or you've got to tuck it, which definitely causes a muzzle high position. So I changed that position a little bit. So.
No, solid info, man. Mark is on from Ontario, Canada. Good morning, Mark. Mike, you want to, I think, unless anybody has any questions regarding the match, if you do, please throw them in there and I'll try to get Mike to it. But I'm going to turn it over to you, man, and walk us through the PCC. Take it wherever you want, brother.
Yeah, so folks, this isn't going to be a terribly long show. This is kind of a last minute idea with Rich and I when his show fell through and I wanted to jump on. And I'm happy to. And this is very interesting to me because I've spent a lot of time in this. So I want to talk to you real briefly about just some of the gun setup stuff that I've kind of figured out on a blowback PCC. But the way this is going to be best is for you to ask a lot of questions if you have them. So if you have questions, have them. If you want to take a second, I'm just bantering. Go ahead and, click share. I know sometimes when you click share, the audio and the video stops for you and you don't want to lose that. So I promise I won't get into the golden secret until you click the share button or send a message and tell people we are on. Also, later on, you can share the video, but audience participation is going to be more important for this particular show. So let's talk about the PCC first of all. So this is my Wilson Combat AR-9G. It runs on Glock magazines. And from the back to the front, I'm just going to tell you what I found preferences. And these are not mandatory things, but they're things that really helped in my training. Number one, this is a BCM buttstock with I think it's an easy Kick-Easy or Kick-Ease patch. I think if you search Kick-Ease from Amazon, Max Leogrand has turned me on to this. It's kind of a cheek weld butt pad. And this actually was kind of unique because this cheek weld butt pad really allowed me to build a fast cheek weld. And it puts my eye with this particular optic directly in front of the window. So my cheek weld was really, really improved with this. And I found that when I was training, I was also shooting so much and mounting so much that, I was getting a bruise on my cheek. And this kind of soft pad helped with that. So this is a very robust buttstock in terms of how it locks out. So it fits very tight. Interesting thing is, are there other buttstocks that will work just fine? Yes, 100%. But, I tried it, I liked it, and, as Max Leograndis would say, it gave me some good vibes, right? So I got some good vibes when I put the sucker on. But that pad really allowed me to aggressively mount a carbine, and I will probably put these on my rifles as well, like that. So from the back to the front. Also, inside of this area, I need to talk about what's inside of it. So I ended up shooting a couple different guns. This is what I would call my heavier gun. It's got a standard 16-inch barrel. And then I have some lighter guns that have basically a 5, an 8, and a 12. We tried different barrel lengths. And in the 5, 8, and 12, there's actually an aluminum shroud. So if you see me shoot it online, you'll see this big-looking aluminum barrel. And what that does is that allows you to meet the ATF requirements for barrel lengths. At the same time, though, it makes the front of the gun very light, very fast to move. So if you're shooting Steel Challenge or whatever else, you're probably going to want a lighter gun that balances a little bit differently, but it makes the gun really light because we do a lot of one-handed running where we're swinging our arms, and if the gun is really heavy, especially if you're smaller and you're not as strong, you're just going to want to get your PCC as light as possible. Now, the downside to a light PCC is that it recoils more because it's lighter. Of course, the recoil impulse itself in a blowback gun moves the gun more. So in the rear of the stock here, what you can't see is I ended up shooting what's called a Kinshot recoil system, which is a hydraulic buffer. And there are some other companies out there that make some great products as well that I will be testing. But this was recommended to me by a top shooter, and I reached out to them, and they were very helpful, and I ended up getting the Kinshot system. A lot of the guys were running a heavy spring, like a 308 spring. I didn't find that helped as much. I actually ran a flat wire spring that was a little bit lighter that I got out of one of my other AR systems. So the Kinshot hydraulic buffer is something you should try if you haven't tried it, if you have a blowback PCC. And then to the front of the gun, a couple things. Number one, check and clear chamber. This particular gun has a kind of a two-stage feeling trigger. Right. So one thing Wilson Combat has that's really, really good is they have a trigger that is blowback proof, let's call it. Right. One of the problems one thing that people misunderstand or maybe undervalue is a trigger that will hold up to the rigors of a blowback gun, which is a very violent recoiling system that has really no delay. You know, the gun fires and all of the explosiveness and pressure violently cycle the bolt back. And a lot of times they use a heavier bolt for more reliability. Well, this is actually a slightly lighter bolt, but the bottom line is to find a trigger that holds up to the abuse of a blowback PCC is really, really important. So this is. Now, the two-stage feel to it is a little different than what I'm used to. So I had to spend a lot of time maintaining contact with the trigger. So let's talk about one of the shooting things that I found myself doing a lot, right? And that was literally when I'm shooting a handgun, oftentimes my finger may lose contact with the trigger as I'm resetting because the handgun recoils, and it, you know, the slide moves up and it pivots in your hand and it returns. Well, with a PCC or a rifle, because of your body contact, you can truly shoot what I would call doubles or pairs, unsighted pairs, where you could literally fire one shot and then just fire again without worrying about a sight picture, even though you would not see a sight picture. But the point is, because of structure, at most distances, I guess back in the day we used to call those hammers, you can do that. So when we're talking about the trigger, you know, if you're losing contact with the trigger, you're probably slowing down your trigger speed, right? So I had to work a lot on kind of changing my trigger finger position on this trigger itself. Now, the safety is a 45.
Mike, before you leave the trigger, I got a question for you, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
Forced reset triggers, are those allowed? Do you own any? Do you use or recommend them?
Well, when you're talking about forced reset, if you're just talking about a trigger with increased spring pressure, you can do anything you want as far as spring pressure. But I think when you're talking about a forced reset trigger, it's mechanically, it's not just spring pressure, it's mechanically resetting your trigger. And it may actually fire when it resets. I'm not positive about that. But
yeah, I don't own one either. I'm contemplating it, but they may outlaw them before you know it, because I mean, it throws your finger off and you could just hammer away on that thing.
Yeah, I'd have to feel that. So when we're talking about triggers, like the question is, what should the reset pressure on the trigger feel like?
Right.
With any trigger, folks, as you're listening to this, with a handgun or a PCC or rifle or whatever else, the more reset spring pressure we have, the more it's going to increase your trigger weight. So the goal is always trying to figure out how to have as lightest trigger as is viable and safe, but at the same time, a lot of reset pressure, because we really do want the trigger to assist us in moving our finger, or at least at higher speeds. If you're someone that shoots slower speeds, that doesn't really matter. But, you know, I think I talked to Max once again about almost a neutral or a negative feeling trigger, which it feels like you have to literally move your finger and pull the trigger back out. Like there's some companies that make a trigger like that. Then maybe in the middle of the zone would be something that has some reset pressure. And then some of the triggers that a lot of these PCC shooters are shooting is they have more of a, I guess, a rolly feel, but they have pretty positive reset weight, which allows that trigger to force their finger forward at speed. And remember, the limitation for trigger speed with a PCC or a rifle is your ability to release the trigger and get back on it, right? That's the speed limitation. So the more you can have something that assists your finger, and we'll talk about this, actually we'll talk about it right now in the training. And if you're listening right now and driving along here in the gym, I want you to take your hand and I want you to grip your firing hand, right? And I want you, when you grip your firing hand, I want you to watch what your trigger finger does. When you grip your firing hand, your trigger finger will start to curve more, right? And then what you're going to find is there's more tension in that trigger finger. Now, because of the tendons and the fascia tissue in your hand, they're all kind of interconnected. So now if I relax those fingers, you're going to find your trigger finger straightens out a lot more, right? So what I found was when I'm pushing trigger speed with a PCC or rifle, the recoil control comes from my body, not my pistol grip hand. Let me be very specific. The recoil control comes from my body and my lead hand. So what I may do with my pistol grip hand is I may hook the front of the pistol grip, right? When I say pistol grip on an AR type system, I may hook but I may leave the rest of the fingers pretty loose. Some of you that are watching the video can kind of see this, right? If not, what you're going to consider trying when next time you go to the range is hooking the 3 fingers on the front of the pistol grip, but remaining pretty relaxed on the rest of them, like almost leaving your hand open, right? And what you'll find is you can release your finger a lot faster at speed. And you may say, well, Mike, that's counter to what you might teach with a handgun. It is, because you're not shooting a handgun. You're shooting a PCC or a rifle. A handgun is only controlled with the force of your hands. The only contact point is in your hands. The recoil with a PCC or rifle is controlled with your body, specifically the stock position on your body, your ability to be as square as possible, and then forward, an aggressive weight forward, and then the pressure you put into the stock itself. So one of the keys, and I know I got off parts and pieces.
I want to ask, because I want to be super clear, man. So
yeah.
Shooting a handgun, we got 2 points of contact. Shooting a rifle, we got 4 points of contact, right? So of those 4, it sounds like what you're saying is that the fire control hand, your shooting hand, the one that's going to control the trigger, that's probably the least amount of pressure of all 4 points of contact.
100%. By far the least important. And in terms of really like a top PCC shooter with the right gun, right? Because keep in mind, I love my blowback, beautiful guns, but a roller delayed system or whatever else, some of the other models out there have a much softer feeling recoil. To be honest with you, I don't find a lot of additional speed with that softer recoil yet, because to me, it's how the gun returns. And when I finally got this gun set up, even though it recoils more violently, it returns pretty good. You know, I'll remind everybody that I think back in the day, Leo Grandis, that won 8 national championships, he's the only U.S. PCC national champion, was shooting a blowback gun, and he beat people that were shooting the SIG MPX variants and whatever else, right? Okay, so what happens is with a gun that moves a little more or has a little bit more recoil, to fire at the top speeds, the top shooters are probably shooting 11 splits, maybe 12 splits sometimes, right? When they really get on the trigger. And to do that, they probably can't have a lot of tension in their trigger finger that's caused by gripping the gun. And you can get away with that with the PCC or rifle, because the structure comes from your body position and stock and the lead hand. With the handgun, at closer ranges, you can get away with it. So a lot of people say, well, Mike, how do you shoot fast splits? I will say, it depends on what you mean by fast splits and what the distance that you're shooting those splits is, right? Because the second you release pressure in your hand with the handgun gyrates more during recoil. And guess what? If the gun is gyrating more, then your group size is increasing at speed, if that makes any sense to you. Okay. So
we talked about the selector switch, Mike. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
Yeah, so safety. So safety is basically a 45-degree throw safety. This allows me to wipe it on and off much faster than a 90-degree throw. And matter of fact, I will be playing with potentially there's some special operations units out there that anytime their finger comes out of the trigger and they move or do anything else, the safety goes on. For the average competition shooter, I wouldn't poo-poo on that, but we probably wouldn't necessarily do that. Just like with a 1911, I may shoot a couple targets. If I move to the next position, my safety probably wouldn't go on. And you may say, well, Michael, why wouldn't you put the safety on? Well, that's a great question. Why wouldn't I put the safety on? It probably doesn't take any more time if it's ingrained to an extent. So this 45-degree throw safety allows me to wipe the safety on and off a lot faster. And more specifically, not just off, and I guarantee it's off, and I can kind of ride the safety if you're watching me on the video, but then I can wipe it back on much faster as well. It's hard to do this in this gun position. So that's why I'm running these, I think these are Battle Arms 45-degree safeties, right? Keep in mind, if you shoot a gun, if you're in law enforcement or the military, shoot a 3-round burst gun or whatever, that's not going to be as valuable to you, because you're going to have a full throat to go to your 3-round burst or your full auto system anyways. So just something to consider. Not a lot more on this gun. It's got the Ambi Wilson Combat charging handle. This is a 3-hole system. And interestingly enough, you could switch it out. You could go 3-hole on one side, 1 hole on the other side, or 2-hole, 1 hole. They have a 1-hole, 2-hole, and a 3-hole system. I think they actually have a 4-hole system as well, which gets a little bit big and kind of in the way. Shot a Holosun optic in this particular match. They've been working great for me. I do have some of the new Vortex optics on the handgun optics, but I didn't have a good mounting solution in the last minute. And when you travel internationally, they make you declare the optics and stuff on the gun. So I had already listed what I was probably going to be taking, and I was kind of limited. On the front of the gun, you might notice something that I talked about real briefly in our members Q&A, and that is this basically forward handle on the handguard, right? So it's small. You can see what I've done is I've cut it off. So I've sliced it off at the back so I can slide it in and out of a port pretty aggressively, but it actually allows me to create rearward tension on the gun that I can't create when I'm just grabbing the normal handguard. Maybe a gimmick, but for me, it really increased my ability to pressure the gun, and I haven't found any downside to it at this point in time. And in years past, I would not have ran something like this, but that's the deal with training for the last 6 months. I really kind of looked at everything, right? And keep in mind that when you're shooting a PCC or a rifle, I think the lead hand, the hand that's up on the handguard, so if you're a righty, that'll be your left hand. If you're a lefty, that'll be your right hand, is probably the most important hand on the gun, combined with your body position, right? Having our shoulders as square as possible, having the stock as centered as possible, and then having our forward body aggressive and somewhat forward on the gun, right? So your shoulders have to be in front of your hips if you're trying to shoot a maximum speed with the rifle or PCC. And this, vertical foregrip that's kind of cut off really assisted me in terms of bringing pressure to the rear at speed. And what I found was when I kind of played with it, is it's in the exact same position when I extend my left arm as my handgun position, right? So we're exactly how my hand is on a handgun, basically sits on this gun with the vertical foregrip. Now, one thing I do is I wrap my thumb on top of the gun, and I'm literally gripping the handguard when I'm shooting. Okay, now I don't point the finger down the side of the gun. I know a lot of top shooters do that. Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. I haven't found a lot of value, but for me, that finger gets in the way when I'm doing quick bracing. So I haven't found enough value in that for me to do it. I think, it might be another gimmicky thing that makes people feel good. They feel like they're pointing more toward the target. I haven't personally found value in that. Okay. And then, forward on the gun, it's a full length handguard. So I have more handguard to brace on things. I've got rubber pads on both sides, so I can do a quick brace on rubber pads. That's something you might consider as a rubber pad where you can brace high, left, or right, and then go from there. So questions on anything we've talked about? Hey, there's Adrian Rollins on. Good morning, folks.
Yeah, Alan Kelly says, good morning, running late from Occupy, Virginia. He has coin number 1571. And if you're like, what is a coin number? What the heck is that all about, Mr. Seeklander?
Man, coin number, American Warrior Society coin number, what was he? 1571. Mr. Rich Brown is coin number 2. I'm coin number 1. If you don't have your coin, consider jumping on AmericanWarriorSociety.com. You can click Get My Coin and then kind of see a video and understand what the American Warrior Society is all about. Which, by the way, I was checking out some of the weapon retention stuff in there because I was going to do some promo and that stuff, Rich. The content is gold. I bought a membership the other day. Eric Raffel sells a membership online as well. He's not a membership. He sells content. You can't download it, which I hated because I wanted to watch it on the airplane, but it's really good. It's Eric Raffel. He's the GOAT as far as handgun shooters. And I loved it. It was really great. But then I went over to our content vault and I realized how much stuff is in there. So if you're a coin member, if you're not a coin member, you should be a coin member. Really, folks, you could spend the entire year studying different subjects and improving your defensive handgun skills, defensive rifle skills. It's a great content vault. So,
yeah. So thank you for that, man. I'll go back to the optic for a second. Is there a color dot you like? Do you like the ring around the center dot? What MOA running? Tell us more about that.
Right. So with the Holosuns and some of the other optics out there, you can switch the reticle pattern. So you can go from a big circle and a little dot to a big circle or just a little dot. In the end, I ended up going with the little dot. And I will tell you, if I'm shooting really close range stuff, like speed, burn it down. Like today when I go to the range, it's speed day. I might kind of like the bigger ring and the center ring. It just gives me something a little bit more robust. I pick it up a little bit faster, but I think across the board for varying targets. So maybe a stage where I have close targets and far targets, the outer ring is probably not necessary. So I settled with one dot, versus one ring. So as far as color, I have the green optic and I have the red. In the end, I thought I would see green a little bit better, but I ended up liking red. Red shows up better on different target colors and variations. It shows up slightly better on maybe a brown target with a green background. And FYI, like in the PCC World Shoot, the targets are all white. So you'll shoot classic targets, mini classic targets, micro classic targets in steel, but they're all white. Steel's painted yellow. So it's a different color format than those of you that compete and are used to IDPA and USPSA. But I ended up settling with a single dot and red.
Yeah, it's funny. I got into turkey hunting last few years, and one of the things everybody's like, you really don't want to run a red dot with a turkey, because where you're going to put that dot is in the red of their throat, right? And it's going to wash out. And didn't find that to be the case. So it's just one of those things where listen to the good advice, appreciate for what it is, and then try what's going to work best for you, because I believe the science will tell you that you can acquire green dots better than a red dot, although it doesn't work for me. I red dots on everything, and you're red-green colorblind, so I don't know you're the best person to ask, but do you know the MOA that you run on that dot?
I think the Hollow Sun, I think it's a 1.5. Can't read on the side. I think it's a 1.5 or 2. It's a very small dot in the center. So it's a very small MOA, and you can run a magnifier behind the Hollow Sun as well on this optic. So if I wanted, when I shoot PCSL this year, more than likely I'll shoot this optic. Unless someone else tells me to shoot a different optic, and I'll have a magnifier behind it that I can take on or put on.
What's your zero on that, Mike?
Right now, because it's PCC 9mm, I have a 30-yard zero. Right. So we were shooting targets from 80 yards, or I guess 88 meters, 88 yards, 80 meters, all the way into close range targets. So what I found was a 30-yard zero. A lot of targets were in that 30 to 40 meter range. And then, at 50 yards, then I was going to be slightly high, which I'd rather be high and away from a no-shoot, if I'm holding high on a no-shoot, but pretty much dead on back at about 80-ish or so yards from meters. And then everything closer, of course, I've got to hold over. So I have to hold a tight no-shoot. I can hold over. So 30, 35 yards is probably a pretty darn good zero for most 9mm, depending on the velocity and the height of the optic and stuff like that. So that works.
What grain were you shooting? Bullet?
Well, so that's another kind of complication. So ammo over there was kind of tricky, right? So I had to set up and figure out ammo that shot accurately out of the gun that I could get over there, because I had a Polish buddy bringing me ammo. So I ended up shooting 115 grain S&B, which another thing in IPSC, and I didn't catch this till the very end, is it has to be a minimum of 115 grains. And someone was saying there at the very end that they thought that the S&B might actually weigh light. If it weighs 1 grain light, you get DQ'd. So a lot of little things that I learned and had to overcome in this particular match, but I ended up shooting 115 S&B, which hits pretty hard. It's not as soft shooting as my Wilson Combat ammo. And you may say, well, Mike, why not your Wilson Combat? Because I couldn't get enough over there, and you can't ship it over there. And they don't, they had a match pallet going over there initially. A different company did. That didn't work out. So it was kind of like trying to figure out what to do. So
yeah. So normally you would shoot what, 124?
135. All my Wilson
135.
Combat truncated cone is 125 or 135 grain ammo.
And that works better with a blowback system, or you think that grain works better with any system?
No, it's very accurate. It's very soft shooting. It's just very good ammo. That truncated cone bullet feeds really good in most handgun profiles and PCC profiles. So it's just really, really good ammo that Wilson Combat predominantly loads in their guns. They do make some really, really accurate hollow point variants, but once again, the Czech Republic, you can't take hollow points. So I had to stick with a full metal jacket types ammunition over there as well.
Dan says, did the foregrip help or hurt for any of your bracing positions?
It makes no difference. I'm not using the foregrip to brace. I'm using the front of the handguard to brace or the side of the handguard to brace. So it's not really one or the other as far as the hand grip. The hand grip is specifically when I'm not braced and I'm pulling the gun into my body. So as long as it's small and doesn't get in the way, that's not an issue whatsoever. So this is, which is exactly why I cut it down. And, Dan and Rich and those listening and or watching, I did a lot of work in and out of positions and ports to see if it would hang up and cause an issue. Because I'm like, if it causes an issue and gets hung up, I'm not going to do it. But in the end, I can say that I really, really like this gear gimmick, this thing that I put on the front of the gun. If you notice, both my pistol grip and my vertical foregrip are stippled, so they're pretty aggressive. Pistol grip, I think, is pretty important because remember, we're doing a lot of one-hand control, so I really don't want this thing slipping around on my hand. I want to have control. So Wilson Combat did me a big favor and stippled my pistol grips and stippled my vertical foregrip, which I really, really like a lot. So
I've never, just full disclosure, I've never shot a PCC match. So this is maybe not a good question, but it's something I'm interested in. You mentioned running, and I've had shoulder surgery. I got a screw in my shoulder. So when you unmount to take off running, do you ever take two hands off the gun? So where you're running just with the PCC only in your right hand? Okay.
All the time. Yeah. We're all.
So then you're Judy chopping back onto the foregrip, basically, right?
That's right. Yeah. So I'm just lining the hand, right back up into position. I know it's hard to see or probably you can't tell. And I'm not, coming on the back of the vertical foregrip. I've just learned to come on the front and pull it back into the gun. So it's just something you require the position. But yeah, we're coming off the shoulder all the time, whether it's, like this or even, maybe under the shoulder. Of course, under the shoulder was not an option over in Czech because of the berms and the rule. So typically over the shoulder, which is also why you want to have a gun that's balanced pretty well and have a gun that's light enough that you can control with one hand. You can keep both hands on the handgun, but if you're doing a long run or whatever else, and I'll give you an example, like one of the stages over there, you had to open a door, right? So you had to, have the gun up in position and the muzzle in a safe position, but you had to open the door. So just keep that in mind as well.
And when you're running weapon unsafe, are you going to get DQ'd? What's the rules on that?
Well, no, the rule is finger out of the trigger guard. If the finger's out of the trigger guard, you're good to go. Now, if you have a hot gun and the finger's out of the trigger guard and the muzzle exceeds the berm in theory over there, then they would have given you a warning. But the indication we got was if the muzzle goes over the berm and a hot gun in stage, they may very well DQ you. So I was really working to try to keep the muzzle down in a slightly different position. Which, full disclosure, I'll probably train safety on and muzzle down anyways. When I shot the European Championships many years ago with the handgun, I saw 3 shooters, not an exaggeration. 3 shooters got DQ'd right in front of me and Mr. Phil Strader, the 3 shooters that went right before us. So we were literally pointing our guns down during reloads. And if, most of you, the handgun load, it's very easy for the muzzle to come up slightly to look inside your mag well. Well, luckily for me, I had trained a different handgun angle that, the mag well points toward your mag pouches. Those that have taken my classes know that. And that helped me a lot as well. So.
And ambi charging handle, is that something that's nice to have or a must have?
Well, yes. Most charging handles have some ambi feature on them anyways, but, bottom line is you might be shooting with the other hand, right? So if I need to hit it with my left hand or my right hand, I think that's important. At this day and age, there's so many charging handle variants. This is, of course, a Wilson Combat part, so it's a no-brainer that I have a good, robust ambi charging handle. But yeah, I can't see a reason not to have an ambi charging handle. And I think the only time you wouldn't have one is if you have literally an old school charging handle with the release on one side, which, you could be a problem if you have to shoot with the other hand. There's a lot of times where you're forced to shoot with the other hand or transition to the other hand. So if you had to do a tap rack, well, then maybe the ambi charging handle would help you out. So I think it makes it more consistent.
Yeah, I completely agree. I kind of fought that for a while, and when I got the BCM, and I'm like, man, I'll never go back to not having one.
Absolutely.
Mike, anything else on the PCC?
I don't think so, man. I think that's it. If we don't have any other questions.
I don't see any questions now. There won't be much more to talk about in regard to carbines, rifle caliber carbines, but is there anything you want to talk about on that?
No, and let's do this and we'll kind of close it out, folks. I just want to remind you, if you do the defensive rifle program or my PCC program, they're fundamental in nature. They're designed to get you to the point where you are ready to go shoot a match, or you're getting some serious skill with your defensive rifle. It's all in the AWS Coin Members Vault. Of course, they're available individually if you want to check them out. But one of the things that I talk about is drop, drive, pull, press. And that stuff is still critically important. So when I'm talking about drop, drive, pull, press, I'm going to stay hopefully in range of the microphone, right? I'm talking about, dropping the elbow, drive, right? Drive the shoulder forward, pull the stock into your body. That might be the single most important thing that I worked on in the last several months. And let me be very specific. I'm using my lead hand, my handguard hand, the hand that's up on the handguard to pull the gun into my body. My secondary pull position or pressure is with the 3 fingers on the pistol grip. And I promise you, when you go to the range next, I want you to square your shoulders up. I want you to get your shoulders forward to your hips, right? Which means you're going to have to counterbalance and get the butt slightly back. And I want you to mount the rifle nice and high where you're not turtling your head down. Don't try that touch your nose on the charging handle crap. That means your stock has collapsed too far and you're doing something wrong anyways. And I want you to use your lead hand, and I want you to grip that handguard with your lead hand. And I want you to aggressively pull it directly back into your center line in a neutral manner. The second thing I want you to do is hook the pistol grip with your 3 fingers, and then leave the rest of your hand relatively loose. Not so loose you're not holding the pistol grip, but just pretty loose, right? And that is going to allow you to loosen your trigger finger up, and of course where you can wipe the safety off. And then just learn, when you're pulling the trigger and you're working on shooting speed, learn to touch the trigger like it's something hot, where you release it really fast. Okay, so every time I'm pulling the trigger, it's like I'm touching something hot. Now, the pressure of that recoil control comes from your lead hand and your hooking fingers, but more importantly, the pressure between your stock and your body, and the body being in the right position, is what's going to give you true recoil control. Set up 2 targets. Set up a target at 10 yards and maybe set up a second target at 20 yards and practice transitioning back and forth from the 10-yard to the 20-yard target. You're going to be a little bit slower and more deliberate on the 20-yard target, a little bit faster on the 10-yard target. But you should see a definitive increase in your trigger speed if you're doing what you need to do. Now, if you're an avid handgun shooter like me, and you're losing contact with the trigger, I want you to consider riding the trigger more, but doing a full release. What I mean by that is, if you watch my trigger finger, I've gone to the wall and I've prepped the trigger. So I'm going to fire and I'm going to release, but I'm going to try not to lose contact with the trigger. So that was lost contact. Not loss, not loss, not loss, not loss, loss, okay? Because every time we release that trigger or lose contact with the rifle, we're probably losing a little speed, because remember, the body controls the recoil and the handgun flips and returns. So if we lose contact with the trigger, it's because of how the handgun moves in our hand and the speed we're shooting at anything except for extremely close targets. With the rifle or PCC, you can ride the trigger a little bit more close contact without fearing the lack of reset. I'm not saying you hold and just try to reset to the wall. Like, you got to get off it completely to reset, but you'll find a little bit of trigger speed there. But the main thing you're going to find is in your body position.
For the trigger techniques you're talking about, Mike, single stage, 2-stage, what do you recommend?
So great question. It depends, right? So here's the bottom line. I don't have a choice on my PCCs, because the 9mm trigger that holds up to blowback is a 2-stage feeling trigger, right? I would tell you that in the past, I prefer what we call, in Wilson Combat lingo, our 3-gun trigger, which is designed for the rifle, but they don't make a 3-gun variation for the PCC because the blowback is so hard on the trigger. Matter of fact, they don't recommend it. So don't buy a Wilson Combat 3-gun trigger and put it on your PCC. I've done it, full disclosure, honest to the crowd, always. But there could be some issues there. You may have some bump fires or whatever else. So I didn't have a choice. So I have to shoot a 2-stage type trigger with my current blowback system because it's very reliable. But that said, when I started to get used to it, and now I have an actual prep point, just like I do in my handgun, I'm finding myself grooving into that and kind of liking that. But I'm not going to make a decision on that yet. I got to do some additional testing with some rifles. So.
Okay, great question. Here's another one. Says, would you use the same technique and aggressive pull into the shoulder for a sport like PRS or QP, where the positions are challenging and the distance are much longer?
I don't know what QP is. PRS, if you're shooting 500 or 600 or 700 yards, should you be pulling into the shoulder? Probably. More gun movement is more gun movement. So PRS, where you want to stay in the window and be able to see, the reticle and what happened to the shot or whatever else. I think you got to stay pretty tight on the gun as long as it's not influencing the actual trajectory, meaning you're not influencing the gun by putting pressure on the gun, right? Keep in mind, what I'm talking about is shooting a carbine or a PCC at, 5 yards to 150 yards or maybe 200 or 300 yards very, very effectively and quick. I have not found that being loose on the gun anytime a repeat shot is needed or a follow-up shot is warranted is good. But I will fully disclose I'm not a PRS shooter, so I can't really answer PRS questions.
All right, Mike, anything else you wanted to cover this morning?
Shoot the dot, right? When I mean shoot the dot, when you're really trying to figure out what works, you got to get out and shoot. The side kick is awesome because it gives you felt recoil without having to go to the range. And you're going to see exactly what your recoil control system does to the dot. So shoot the dot and learn from it, right? I say that the aiming process dictates all speed. The sooner we attach ourselves to that with a rifle, PCC, or even a handgun, the sooner we let go of extraneous information that's not warranted. The only thing that matters is what the aiming process is telling you. Now, the aiming process may very well tell you put more pressure on the gun in whatever manner, right? But the aiming process always dictates speed. So when you go to the range and just shoot and let the aiming process dictate speed, it's like, it's a relief. It's an epiphany. It's like, I don't have to think about shooting. Why? Because person number one that we talked about earlier in the show is the thinker. Person number two is the unconscious. If you've done any reps at all, or enough reps, it will take over the shooting for you. The second is, if you want to get really good with PCC and rifle, work on your body position. You've got to be behind the gun in the right manner. The stock has to be centered. Your shoulders have to be square or as square as possible, and your upper body weight has to be forward. I see far too many shooters leaning back, right? In slow fire, nothing matters in terms of structure. If you're trying to shoot fast, rapid fire, fast follow-up shots, your structure controls the recoil. So if you have a bad structure, you're never going to have the same speed you would if you had a good structure. Okay.
Solid advice, brother. With that being said, if there's nothing else, Mike, why don't you close this out?
Okay, folks, there you go. Get to the range. Give some of this a try. Give it a rewind. Share the show. Especially share the show. Yeah, a buddy that got DQ'd and learned from it or had the same experience I had. Share the show, man. Share the show, folks, with someone that needs to hear it, someone that wants to improve or get into PCC, someone that is learning to shoot their rifle, or someone that maybe did something that doesn't make them happy, that they need to learn from, and they realize that needs to understand that even guys and gals at the top level make mistakes, like me. We're all human, right? So remember that. Don't forget that, right? Don't be too hard on yourself. But get to the range and train. Work at it. Don't be fearful. Get your shoes on, like we talked about in the podcast, folks. That's all I have. Stay safe out there. And until then, train hard.